It's time for another episode of Let's Talk Business South Carolina, featuring industry outlooks, panel discussions on trending topics, and interviews with business executives, community leaders, and government officials. And now, coming to you from the Drum Creative Studio, here's your host, longtime South Carolina business publisher, Rick Jenkins.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Business South Carolina, coming to you from the Drum Creative Studios. I'm your host, Rick Jenkins. In this episode, we will be presenting the 2024 South Carolina Aerospace Outlook, brought to you by the South Carolina Council on Competitiveness, or SC Competes. There are two first occurrences for today's show. One, the Aerospace Outlook will actually be presented over the course of two episodes. There's just too much great info to share for us to squeeze it all into one show. And second, for the very first time, I actually won't be moderating the conversation. That duty will fall to someone much more qualified to lead the discussion on this topic. Stephen Astemborski, the Director of Engagement and Aerospace Initiatives for SC Competes, will lead the conversation for both episodes. As I mentioned, the 2024 Aerospace Outlook is brought to you by SC Competes. They are a statewide, business-led, nonprofit organization that works to improve the long-term competitiveness of South Carolina. Aerospace is just one of the established industry clusters they support. Another is logistics. Recently, we aired the Logistics Economic Impact Study, which was commissioned by SC Competes and presented by Dr. Joy Von Nessen, a highly renowned research economist at the Darla Moore School of Business. If you missed it, that episode is archived here on our YouTube channel. South Carolina's aerospace industry isn't just about the Boeing 787 manufactured in North Charleston or the Greenville-built F16. The industry has evolved into one of the state's most dynamic sectors, with an annual economic impact of more than $28 billion. Like I said, there's a lot to discuss. So let's get to it. We're going to take a brief 60-second break, and when we return, Stephen Astemborski will get the conversation started. We'll be right back.
Welcome to part one of our 2024 Aerospace Outlook. As Rick mentioned, my name is Stephen Astemborski, and I am the Director of Engagement and Aerospace Initiatives at the South Carolina Council on Competitiveness, also known as SC Competes, which means I lead SC Aerospace, our industry cluster that works to connect, support, and grow the aerospace industry throughout the state of South Carolina. 2024 is going to be an exciting year at SC Competes. In addition to our signature events like SC Tech Talk, in North Charleston this April, or SC Aerospace Night with the Greenville Drive this May, where we'll be featuring aerospace leaders to drive the discussion on new technologies such as advanced air mobility. We'll also be releasing our 2024 Economic Impact Study to show where we've been and how much aerospace has grown throughout the state over the last years. But we're not here to talk about where we've been. We're here to talk about where we're going. Next week, in part two, we'll be joined by two leaders from aerospace manufacturing companies in South Carolina. We'll discuss the upcoming manufacturing trends that we'll see in 2024. Today, though, we'll be talking about air passenger travel and air cargo. And no conversation on those two topics would be complete without our two guests today. Dave Edwards, President and CEO of the Greenville-Spartanburg International Airport, and Steve Towns, Founder and CEO of Ranger Aerospace. Gentlemen, why don't you introduce yourselves?
Well, thanks so much, Stephen. Glad to be here today. As Stephen mentioned, Dave Edwards, President and CEO of the Greenville-Spartanburg International Airport. Been here in the upstate for the last 14 years, and just excited to be here and talk about aviation. I think when once it gets in your blood, we might be here all afternoon for the next 2 or 3 hours talking about aviation. So hope you enjoy the segment.
Thanks. Steve?
Hi, Steve Towns, CEO and founder of Ranger Aerospace and various other enterprises. Came here around 30 years ago as the Chief Operating Officer of Stevens Aviation and love it here. So went independent with Ranger Aerospace about almost 27 years ago. And since then, we've been buying and building companies. And our latest and becoming the largest venture of all time is ACL Airshop, the Greenville headquartered air cargo company that's now at 57 airports around the world and still growing.
Well, we'll dive right into it, and I think, Dave, we'll start with you. Air travel is, such a vital, important part of our economy. Whether it's the business traveler flying in and out for work, it's the tourist coming in to visit South Carolina and its beautiful cities, beaches, or its other attractions, or it's someone like me, a transplant that has to head back to New York a couple times a year to visit his parents. But what can we expect for air travel in 2024?
Well, I think things are looking bright. We really, at GSP, we ended the year far ahead of what we projected for calendar year 2023. In fact, the numbers we hit at the end of calendar year 2023 were numbers that we were not expecting until mid-2024. So we're very excited about what's going to happen next year. We have recovered fully from the pandemic from a passenger perspective and are moving past that. And I think we'll see some new announcements of air service in 2024. In fact, probably a new airline here early in the year. So we're very, very excited about that. I would say we're seeing some slowdowns in the travel from a leisure perspective. Some of that, revenge COVID travel that happened over the years, especially to some key leisure destinations around the country, is starting to dry up as disposable income is shrinking from what it was during the COVID period. But still, overall, I think what's offsetting that is the business travel is starting to fully pick up again. So we're seeing business travel get back to potentially where it was pre-COVID, not quite there yet, but getting close. And I see that continuing in 2024.
Very good, very good. Steve, speaking of 2020, no conversation out of aerospace is going to be complete without talking about the slowdowns that we saw in 2020. But there was a lot of major changes that happened that year, particularly in how we move goods across the globe. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what changed then and how that is carried on until today, and then which of those trends we see continuing and which ones we sort of see changing in 2024?
Sure. Let's headline it as pivot, accelerate, reset. So here we are in early 2020. Everything was going okay until about 3 months into the year when the whole bottom dropped out of the industry. All the passenger fleets were grounded, and we thought it was really going to be a serious disaster, including for our section, the air cargo section. Only months later, though, all the freighters swooped in to pick up the slack. Most cargo flies palletized on freighters. We invested heavily on a fast basis, accelerated with them, and for the following 2.5 years, we had incredible growth, and we felt good about it because we were helping get vaccines out there. We were helping world trade keep moving. Even though the ships were all backed up in the harbors and the fleets were all still grounded, we had what I'll call the COVID sugar high of 2.5 years of remarkable performance, full employment, and just blowing and going, so to speak. Now, where are we now? We're in an industry reset. That doesn't mean it's bad. It just means it's resetting back to a normal 3 to 4% real growth over the next few years. And so we're seeing some turbulence as it comes back to a reset. That's where we are right now. I feel really good about where the company is right now and where we're going in the industry. I think we're positioned just right.
Good. That's great to hear. Dave, I know we started off talking about air travel, but, piggybacking a little bit off of what Steve was talking about with air cargo, for anybody, I know I've been out to GSP a bunch and seen what you all have been doing there to support the air cargo industry. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that and what the future for that looks like and GSP's role in air cargo?
Absolutely. And Steve really, I think, articulated what's happened over the last 3 or 4 years really well. And we've seen that at GSP. So while we were growing in our international air cargo activity pre-COVID, we saw a huge boom during COVID. As those passenger aircraft came out of service flying internationally and the freighters came into service, we were the beneficiary of that activity at GSP during COVID. That meant in 1 year we grew by about 60% in air freight, international air freight coming in and out of the airport. We've seen a softening over the last, I'll say even almost 2 years now, probably 18 months to 2 years. And we all thought in mid-2023 there might be a stabilization and then maybe get back to some growth. It still stayed soft pretty much through the end of 2023 for us. at the airport. And we're hoping in mid-2024 we really see that stabilization again and back on the growth trend for us. But we still are far ahead, as Steve mentioned, of where we were in 2019. So while there's been this reset, and we all go, oh my gosh, we've lost a lot of traffic, a lot of volume over the last 12 to 24 months. The reality is we're still far ahead of where we were in 2019. So we're optimistic about the future. And again, what's currently occurring in the air cargo world. You look at that 4% annual growth and you take that out into the future as a secondary gateway in the U.S., we think we're still well placed for success in the future. We can still deliver freight faster than you can get it in and out of any large gateway in the U.S. out of GSP, and we think that's going to continue to bode well for us in order to attract additional business to the airport and distribute here in the Southeast region.
Yeah, I think that. Oh, well, Steve,
can I build on that?
Please.
I'm a big fan of GSP Airport, not just because I live here or because our headquarters is here, but when you think about smaller airports where Charlotte and Atlanta are both congested, different kinds of rates and so forth, GSP is remarkably well located. It's at the center of a huge population outreach. It's got the inland port, really good road, rail, and air and ocean connectivity. I think it's a hidden gem. It's one of the best medium-sized intermodal hubs in the Southeast, in my opinion. And that's my practiced opinion. Every one of the 747s coming in and out of here that are occasionally waking you up at night are our customers. So I love this airport. And what I see at this airport is happening in other places. One of the reasons why I'm going over to Baku, Azerbaijan in a couple of weeks is not only to sign a huge contract, but they are setting up an intermodal multimodal airport over there with road, rail, and shipping with 18 wide-body slots as a starting kit. So we're going to be right there helping them do that.
That's amazing. I'm thinking about skipping ahead to next week when we're going to be talking about our manufacturing a little bit more specifically. But one of the things I always hear from our manufacturers is the ability to be agile and not have to wait on your product and being able to have easier access at a place like GSP rather than getting caught up at Atlanta or Charlotte. I think it's very critical, and I think it's been really has allowed the state to build on its already good logistics infrastructure. Very exciting to see where we're going to go in 2024.
Well, and I think we're so keen on our ability to continue to grow the business. In the last roughly 12 to 18 months, we made some additional investments in the cargo facilities we have at the airport. We expanded our cargo building by another 50,000 square feet, so we now have a state-of-the-art 160,000 square foot cargo facility. We just doubled the size of our aircraft apron on the cargo side. That was another $16 million investment that we made. That now allows us to park simultaneously 6 747-8s out there, and so we're ready for when it comes. So we're optimistic.
And may I speak to what you said about manufacturers and why air freight is important? Only about 2% of the world trade, flies on airplanes in terms of weight and volume. But it's over 35% of the value of world trade. So we're not shipping lumber, and we're not shipping coal and things like that on airplanes, but we're shipping all the high-speed inventory, all the highly perishables, all the really, really exotic electronics and so forth. Those are all going on airplanes.
Sure.
And that's not going to stop.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I would just add to that, again, to Steve's point, is that if you look at GSP and where we've come, we've now moved, and it bounces around a little bit in international trade, but we're now in the top, 20 to 22nd in international air trade volume from a weight standpoint and from a value perspective. Trade-wise, that value is about $6 billion a year in international trade coming through the airport. So significant dollars and significant benefits to the community.
Where do we see the further growth of that? Is it continuing, our relationship that we have with Europe? I know with the flights we have in Germany, and I know we have flights, into South Korea and into China. Do we see just further growing those, or do we see expanding to other markets?
Yeah, I think it's both. So I think you never want to turn a blind eye to those folks that have gotten to where you're at. So we're going to continue to work with our current partners to grow that service, whether it's into Europe, specifically into Germany, but we may expand that and look into Liège and some other destinations in and around Europe. Maybe try to do a little bit better about getting into the UK. The Seoul, Korea activity is doing well along with the China activity. We want to get back into Mexico. We had Mexico service. That's pulled back a little bit right now, so we want to get back into Mexico. We've talked to, some carriers like Air Canada about moving some freight, again, into Canada and utilizing them actually to go overseas as well. We think there's some opportunities going south into Central and South America forward, which we haven't really touched yet. I mean, we're going to Mexico, but not in Central and South America. We think there's an opportunity for it's a hard piece of the business to break into, especially when you talk about perishable activity, because a lot of that goes into South Florida, frankly, and it's hard to break those freight forwarders and operators out of that mold that they've been in for a long, long time. They're very comfortable in it. But we think there's, in particular in seafood, there's maybe the potential to move some product from a seafood perspective in and out of GSP.
Sure. Steve, global perspective, I know ACL Airshop is located all around the world. How many sites are you up to now?
57 airports, 6 continents. We have some trips coming up aimed at business development. In mid-January, I'll be over in Eurasia, in Baku, Azerbaijan, working on the largest contract in our company's history, and also positioning ourselves to be the air cargo equipment provider and partner at a huge new free trade zone with 18 wide-body slots. In mid-February, we're going to Mumbai, India. We've been trying to crack into Mumbai for 3 years. One of the biggest populations in the world. It's a very, very booming economy. Their aviation industry is very robust. It's hard to get in there. We're signing a deal in Mumbai to establish our first facility there. I'm not going to name the city, but as you might guess, it could probably be Mumbai. But we have 2 or 3 other cities that we're working on with a good in-country partner. 1 month after that, I'll be in Hong Kong. And in Hong Kong, we're going to be working on the expansion of our Asia-Pacific operations, where so much strategic growth is happening, and making some special announcements about our company. So that's sort of my typical next few months.
Sure.
It goes with the territory, but it is an international business headquartered right here in Greenville, South Carolina, benefiting greatly from GSP Airport.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. That's it's incredible to know that from here in Greenville, the connection we have globally. I mean, it's I know it started with a specific effort in the late 60s, early 70s when we got companies like Michelin, but to know that we really reach out and touch all these parts of the world is something that we should all be very proud of. So, well, Steve, what else is ACL Airshop doing to position itself? Is there any new technologies coming forward, or any new new ideas that ACL Airshop is helping to lead the air cargo industry in right now?
I can speak to 2 things. Tracking and tracing technology for big data analytics, Bluetooth and so forth. We were first in market with Bluetooth tracking and tracing on cargo pallets and containers. Now everybody's doing it, and I'm glad, because the more people that get into that, the more efficient all those customers are. So we've been making a big dent in that for 7 years now, and we're going to continue that technology roadmap endlessly, investing millions to keep getting smarter and better about that. Secondly, I want to talk only briefly about sustainability. Our company has been the voice of sustainability every year for the last 3 or 4 years at the International Air Transport Association annual gigantic symposium for World Air Transport. And this year, we're going to be talking seriously about sustainable aviation fuel. Now, I know that doesn't sound like it has anything to do with cargo, but it sure does, because by 2050, all the air carriers in the world have said they're committed to going to net carbon zero by 2050. Do you know how hard that is? Here's how much sustainable aviation fuel has to be produced that year to fly all the airplanes. 186,000 full Olympic swimming pools that year. How are we going to get there? I think the state of South Carolina can put a very interesting dent in that. I think that there are some announcements that are being worked on and some mechanics that are being worked on right now that South Carolina could actually become a production state. If that is at all possible, I intend to help.
Yes. No, it's very good to hear. And that was the next thing I was going to talk about, was what are the trends that we need to be prepared for coming down the pike from your point of view as well, Dave? Is sustainable aviation fuel? What have you seen going on there? Is it other sort of electrification around the airport? I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that most of those trends are kind of aimed at the sustainability, but from your seat, what do you see us needing to be prepared for in 2024 and beyond?
Yeah, I think in the last, it's been the last couple of years, I've gotten pretty deeply involved in a group that's talking about energy transition. And so we've had an energy transition summit. We held a piece of that up here at the airport. We also spent some time over at Clemson talking about energy transition. Also spent a couple of other meetings down in Aiken talking about it. So for us at the airport, I think it's going to be extremely important. So we are talking about building a microgrid as an example at the airport, at least to start a 2.5 megawatt solar farm somewhere on airport property. We've identified a couple of locations, 3.5 megawatts of battery storage facility. Want to move to spinning generation that runs on natural gas, eventually be able to convert that to a hydrogen fuel cell moving forward in the future. So we think some of those things are really important as we move ahead. To give you an example of maybe some of the electrical demand that we're going to see in the future as well, and why we want to look at a microgrid for multiple reasons. One is resiliency. Two is to augment the power that we have at the airport today from the providers that we currently have on the grid. Three is to actually control some costs going forward and trying to control a little bit of our own destiny. And when you look at just the rental car industry alone, as we look to the future, they're predicting that about 25% of their fleets by 20 or within the next 5 years will be electrified. As I mentioned, today in the terminal, we have a 2.5 megawatt peak demand for power. Just with that 25% of EVs needing charging from the rental car companies, that will increase. Their need will be 1.2 megawatts alone. So 50% of the current terminal draw for power will be needed just to supply the EV fleet for rental cars. And I think that's going to become extremely important. We want to do our part as well. I mean, Steve mentioned 2050. That's the big date for everybody to get carbon neutral. Sustainable aviation fuel is definitely going to be a part of that. I hope South Carolina can play strongly in that area. Right now, the amount of, I want to say it's like less than, it's something like 0.5% or something.
It's not that huge
of the current, need of aviation fuel is currently being produced and from a sustainable aviation fuel standpoint. And so we have a long way to go to try to make that happen. But, we've got good people working on it. There's a lot of great companies that are focused around that. And it is really the only thing, in my view, that's going to move the needle when you talk about trying to deal with the carbon footprint of aircraft flying in the sky. There's not much else that can be done. I mean, engines will become more efficient and those kinds of things. Maybe we get some blended wing concepts that start flying that are even more efficient than what we see today. But when you look at aviation as a whole, I think the number's around 2%. We represent holistically 2% of the total carbon footprint worldwide or something in that range. And then we're like airports, without aircraft flying, airports are only about 2% of that. So from an airport perspective, it's really difficult for us to make a dent. We really need it, to accomplish what needs to be accomplished on the reduction of carbon footprint through the airlines. And really that means fuel.
There's a price tag with all this.
Sure.
And the clock is ticking. What is it, 27 years from now? They want to be carbon neutral? The total price tag in the world has been estimated at something between $3 and $4 trillion of capital investment to produce all of the sustainable aviation fuel plants that are necessary to reach that goal. That's a pretty lofty goal. But if you break it down into smaller pieces and start getting local, and then let's start taking a look at the state of South Carolina. The state of South Carolina is so well located in terms of feedstock of piney woods, because that's the best feedstock there is, the location of pipelines, the location of engineering support, and a very robust aerospace industry in general with some wonderful airports. This state could actually play almost a harbinger role in trying to show people how do you spend about $200 to $300 million to stand up that first plant and then do it 8 or 9 times more in the boundaries of South Carolina. I realize that sounds ambitious or maybe even too lofty, but those are the kind of numbers that have to be achieved. You know that I sit at the very interesting intersection of aerospace and big capital. You've known me a long time, so you know that I swim in both of those streams. This is a big capital opportunity to produce very impressive long-term yields on all that sustainable aviation fuel. As my wife from Texas says, just hide and watch.
No, I think there's definitely an incredible opportunity there, and I'm very excited to see where we can take it in 2024 and beyond. So next week I said we're going to be talking with some of our manufacturing companies, but Steve, you also have your own manufacturing plant here in Greenville with ACL Airshop. If you haven't seen it, on what exit is it off of? On 85, exit 40 or so, right?
It's right where 85 South crisscrosses with 185
That's
towards downtown.
Yes, yeah.
Can't miss it.
Yeah, great facility. But, in order for that facility to function, in order for our airports to function, in order for our airplanes to fly, we have to have a workforce ready, willing, and able to go to work there. And, I know that this has been a topic that has taken up all the oxygen in the room of any meeting I've been in over the past year. Where do you see workforce needs going in 2024 and beyond?
It's a great industry to work in, even if you don't have an MIT engineering degree. Young people can come into this clean, cool industry and have a well-paid job for the rest of their life if they just get started. We have people that have been in our company a long time. We have young people who are coming into the company in numerous locations around the world. And what they see is they're coming into a good enterprise. They're coming into a good industry sector. It uniformly pays better than average manufacturing type jobs. Mm-hmm. And it's got that edge. It's got the aviation edge,
Dave, what about for you?
Yeah, I think, it's labor is going to continue to be, top of mind for all of us going forward. And I just sat through yesterday a kind of a pre-briefing on an economic presentation that's going to happen here in the region tomorrow. And when you look at some of the pressures on labor today and wage pressures continuing to go up, we're all going to struggle with that, I think. And either you embrace it and you move forward. I think we've done that at GSP. We've done some things in the last few years to make sure that we're extremely competitive to be able to attract labor. So right now, our attrition rate is about 1.3% on an annual basis, especially with some of the functions that we do in running the cargo facilities. I talked to some of others around the state in the logistics chain that talk about warehousing operations and those things, and they've seen as much as 30, 40, and 50% turnover. But we've been able to really have a stabilized workforce that's desires to stay with us, and I think that's because we're treating people well. In 2023, we're named one of the top employers in the state of South Carolina, which was very satisfying to me because that came from our employee base. That was all based on a survey. And I think if we can continue to do the kind of things that we've done over the last several years, that's going to bode well for us and the kind of people that we're going to be able to keep and the kind of people we're going to be able to attract going forward.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Well, gentlemen, I think we've taken a good look at what to expect in 2024. There's definitely some exciting things coming up. I'm very intrigued, and you can't release them now, but I can't wait to hear what the new routes will be coming out of GSP.
Got to keep some things under wraps.
Yeah. I know. I'm always very...
like Steve. He's not giving you everything.
Yeah. No, I'm always very excited to hear.
I just teased you.
Yeah. But with that, gentlemen, I'll leave the last words to each of you. If you have one thing that you'd like, that you think our viewers need to focus on in 2024. What that is. Steve, why don't you go first?
Our company is known as a high-performance culture. It's not just a trite catchphrase. We really do have a vibrant organization. So my last word would be, I'd like to reach out to all the young people who are still in high school or even middle school to think about a career in aviation or aerospace or any of the other trades and technologies that serve this big industry in South Carolina. It's a great place to work.
Great. Dave?
Well, I'm going to be a little bit more self-serving maybe than Steve in this comment and say that what I'd like to see in 2024 is us to be able to message on a statewide basis the importance particularly of aviation. And when I say aviation, not so much the aerospace side, which people think a lot about with Boeing and Lockheed, et cetera, but the airport infrastructure that we have around the state. We just completed an update to our economic impact study. And that showed that we have about a $4 billion annual economic impact here in the upstate of South Carolina. I think if we redid it statewide, you'd see that economic impact well over $20 billion. And, I know you're going to talk about that here in a little while. What that means for me is I would like to see our state invest more in aviation infrastructure and airport infrastructure around the state. And I think and hope that maybe 2024 we can continue to make some headway on that.
No, that's fantastic. And to follow that up, I think, SC Aerospace and SC Competes, we've helped to kind of shape that picture a little bit. I know you were a vital part of our South Carolina Airports Task Force and the white paper we released last year. And as Dave mentioned, and I mentioned earlier, we'll have our 2024 Aerospace Economic Impact Study, which focuses mostly on manufacturing, but this year we're going to incorporate in some of the economic impact of our commercial airports, 6 commercial airports statewide, as well as also be looking at the economic impact that the South Carolina Technology and Aviation Center has on our state's economy. But with that, I will see you all next week for part 2 of our Aerospace 2024 Outlook. Thanks.